Hello, I am Betsy Bradley, and I am one of the members of the Spokane Historic Landmarks Commission. My topic today is how we can think about compatible new construction in historic districts. Our historic districts convey a sense of time and place and have a high percentage of historic buildings, as this aerial of Brown's Addition Historic District shows. But there is the possibility for new construction on vacant lots and to replace non-historic buildings. We often discuss the compatibility of proposed new construction. Compatible things are not necessarily that similar, but they do work well together. This array of apples here that range from red to green show that there's a great deal of variety within compatibility in the fruit world. And this image on the right of Pacific Avenue in Brown's Addition reminds us how quite different buildings can be compatible in streetscapes. A small brick apartment house seems just right next to a wood frame large single-family home. Broadly speaking, we have two main choices for new design in historic districts. Buildings that look like they might be old, or buildings that look like the time in which they were built, but also seem compatible with the older buildings. These two examples, not from Spokane, and don't really give us a context to consider, but they stand in for the two approaches. Other factors that we take a great deal of time to consider is the compatibility of the proposed new building with its neighbors in the streetscape. And we look at the distance from the sidewalk or the setback of the new building. We look for similarity in scale and height, and also in the forms of buildings and their roof lines. Finally, the locations of garages and driveways can contribute to compatibility. These two bungalows in Sheridan, Wyoming represent a good example of how the new bungalow, the red one on the left, is fairly compatible with the streetscape with an older gable front bungalow on the right. Of course, the older building does not have an attached garage, but other than that, we can see that the setback is similar. Both of the buildings have pitched roof lines, and both of them have porches. And so, in the sense of good neighbors, they are compatible. Why not just make an infill building look historic, you might ask? Well, often the replica designs are better in the countryside than in a historic district, side by side with a historic building. The capture that came with this image on the internet explains it all for me. It almost looks like the real thing. Compatible contemporary design takes some learning to appreciate. Similar quality and use of materials and colors, the level of detailing in the new design, and those streetscape factors that I already mentioned can increase or decrease compatibility. Seeing this Salt Lake City example next to its neighbor shows some visual similarities and differences. And overall, it's a fairly successful compatible design for me. Most of us like the idea of a clear visual reference to historic buildings as a starting point. Then there are a range of solutions, from the more traditional, like we see at the top, to more contemporary designs that can work in historic districts. Depends on the immediate setting for the proposed new building and other factors. I noticed the variety of buildings in our old neighborhoods here in Spokane, as buildings were added over a range of decades. This variability allows for us to focus on streetscape elements and allow for a range of design solutions in order to maintain compatibility. It's also important to remember that you can love historic buildings and appreciate contemporary design. My example of that statement is this new building on a corner in Philadelphia. I have not seen it in real life, but the photographs suggest that even though it breaks a lot of rules for compatible design in a historic district, it's a lovely building, and it's a kind of high quality new design and construction that I'd like to see in the historic districts. And the final thought here is that we have to strike a balance between keeping our district seeming absolutely historic and this sort of dynamic component of urban character. And that we, as she says, the threshold varies from one example to another. And we'll have to find what's right for us in Spokane.